What if the world you perceive is merely a shadow of a deeper reality? We live and breathe in three dimensions: length, width, and height. But what if there is another, perpendicular to them all, a fourth spatial dimension? This isn't about time travel, but a physical direction you can't point to, a place beyond our senses. Imagine a two-dimensional being living on a flat plane. To them, our three-dimensional world would be incomprehensible, magical. A sphere passing through their world would appear as a circle that mysteriously grows and then shrinks into nothing. Could we be like those flatlanders, witnessing mere cross-sections of a higher four-dimensional reality? Can the human mind, evolved for a 3D world, ever truly conceive of, visualize, or understand what lies beyond? In this journey, we will attempt to peel back the layers of our own perception and catch a glimpse of the unseeable. We exist in a universe we can measure: length, width, and height. These three dimensions define our physical reality, from the smallest atom to the largest galaxy. Every object can be located, every movement tracked along these three perpendicular axes. It is the fundamental geometry of our perception, the scaffold upon which our world is built. But what if this framework is incomplete? What if there is another direction entirely different from up, down, left, right, and forward, backward? A fourth spatial dimension, orthogonal to our entire three-dimensional space. This isn't a direction you can point to. It's a mathematical certainty that our minds struggle to visualize. The concept challenges the very core of our intuition. To even begin to comprehend it, we must first accept the limits of our senses. We must consider that our rich, complex 3D world could itself be just a slice, a limited perspective of a much grander four-dimensional reality. The journey begins not by looking outward, but by questioning the very space we inhabit. Is our universe all there is, or is it just one page in a much larger book? To imagine a fourth dimension, we must first step down into a second. Let's travel to Flatland, a hypothetical universe existing only on a flat plane. Its inhabitants are geometric shapes, circles, squares, triangles, who know only length and width. Height is a concept as alien to them as a fourth dimension is to us. Now, imagine a three-dimensional object, a sphere, passing through their world. The Flatlanders would not perceive a sphere. They would witness a miracle or a monster. A single point would appear from nothing, expand into a circle, reach a maximum size, then shrink back to a point and vanish completely. To them, it's an object that changes shape and size, appearing and disappearing at will. To us, the 3D observers, it's simply a consistent sphere intersecting their plane. This brilliant thought experiment, conceived by Edwin A. Abbott in 1884, provides the perfect analogy for our own predicament. If a 4D being were to interact with our 3D world, would we not see the same impossible phenomena? Unexplainable appearances, distortions, and disappearances. It forces us to ask, are we the Flatlanders of a higher cosmos? If we cannot directly see a four-dimensional object, perhaps we can see its shadow. Consider your hand in front of a light. It casts a two-dimensional shadow on the wall. This shadow is a flattened, distorted projection of a three-dimensional object. It lacks depth, but it still communicates information about the original object's shape and movement. As you rotate your hand, the 2D shadow morphs and changes, revealing new aspects of its true 3D form. Now, let's apply this principle one dimension up, What would the shadow of a four-dimensional object look like? It wouldn't be a two-dimensional shape. It would be a three-dimensional projection cast into our universe. We would perceive a solid three-dimensional object. However, as the four-dimensional object rotated in its higher dimension, its 3D shadow in our world would appear to warp and contort in impossible ways. It might seem to turn itself inside out or have parts pass through each other without collision. What we would be witnessing is not a violation of our physical laws, but the dynamic, shifting footprint of a higher dimensional form. This concept transforms our perception. The world around us might just be a shadow play, hinting at a reality of profound complexity. Armed with the concepts of cross-sections and shadows, we can now dare to approach a true 4D object, the Hypercube, more famously known as the Tesseract. A line is 1D. Move it perpendicularly to create a 2D square. Move the square perpendicularly to create a 3D cube bounded by 6 square faces. To get a tesseract, we perform one more impossible step. We move the entire cube in a fourth spatial direction, perpendicular to our 3. The resulting 4D hypercube is bounded not by squares, but by 8 3D cubes. Visualizing this is the ultimate mental challenge. If a tesseract were to pass through our 3D space, like the sphere passing through Flatland, the sight would be baffling. We would first see a point, which expands to become a small cube. Then, seemingly from the very faces of this cube, other cubes would emerge, expanding and distorting. The entire structure would appear to turn itself inside out as it moves, its inner cube becoming its outer boundary and vice versa. This is not the object changing. It is our limited 3D perspective, witnessing different slices of a constant, rigid 4D hypercube. It's a glimpse of a perfectly logical structure that our senses interpret as pure chaos. If a moving projection of a tesseract is too disorienting, there is one final way our 3D minds can grasp its structure: by unfolding it. Imagine a cardboard cube. You can cut along its edges and lay its 6 square faces flat on a table. This 2D pattern, a cross shape, is the net of the cube. It allows you to see all 6 faces at once, sacrificing the 3D form for 2D clarity. We can apply the same logic to the 4D tesseract. While we cannot physically unfold it in our space, we can mathematically project its unfolded form. What would we see? We would see a 3-dimensional arrangement of 8 cubes. A central cube would be connected on each of its 6 faces to another cube. The 8th and final cube, the lid of the hypercube, would be conceptually attached to the exposed faces of the other 6. This 3D net of a tesseract is a static, comprehensible object. It's like an architect's blueprint for a 4D structure. While we cannot experience the final building, this unfolded plan allows us to study its components, count its rooms, and appreciate the elegance of its design, a design that exists just beyond the threshold of our perception. The human mind is a universe of its own, a labyrinth of thought and imagination. But can it truly break the shackles of its 3-dimensional prison? Visionaries and mathematicians like Charles Howard Hinton were convinced it could. In the late 19th century, he devised an intricate system of colored cubes, a rigorous mental exercise intended to build an intuition for the fourth dimension. He urged his students to visualize a tesseract, the 4D analog of a cube, not as a static object, but as a dynamic process, a complex ballet of cubes entering and leaving our perception. His followers spent countless hours trying to internalize this higher dimensional geometry. Yet, a critical question lingers. Were they genuinely perceiving a four-dimensional reality, or merely training their minds to process a highly sophisticated 3D animation? Our brains are masterpieces of evolution, but they were forged to hunt, gather, and survive in a world defined by length, width, and height. Our entire neural architecture, from the retina to the visual cortex, is optimized for this framework. Attempting to truly picture a fourth spatial axis, mutually perpendicular to the other three, is like trying to conceive of an entirely new primary color. It is a cognitive wall, a fundamental barrier. The intellect can grasp the elegant mathematics. It can follow the abstract logic. But the mind's eye, the canvas of our imagination, seems stubbornly bound to project only what it knows, clever shadows and intricate projections within our familiar 3D space. The dream of pure, unaided 4D visualization remains a tantalizing paradox, a key to a locked room that might be inside our own heads. If our minds alone cannot see, perhaps our tools can. How do you map a territory that is, by its very definition, beyond the limits of your sight? If our biology restricts us to 3 dimensions, technology and analogy become our guides to seeing the unseeable. The key lies in understanding shadows and cross-sections. Consider the classic thought experiment of Flatland, a world populated by 2-dimensional beings. To them, the passage of a 3D sphere through their planar universe would be a miraculous and terrifying event. They would witness only a 2D slice, a single point that suddenly appears, expands into a circle, reaches a maximum diameter, then contracts back to a point before vanishing completely. They could never see the sphere in its entirety, only its momentary intersection with their reality. We, in our 3-dimensional space, are in an analogous position relative to the fourth dimension. A 4D hypersphere passing through our world would manifest as a 3D sphere that seemingly inflates out of nowhere, grows to a peak volume, and then deflates back into nothingness. Today, this is no longer just a thought experiment. Powerful computer simulations and virtual reality environments allow us to directly interact with these 4D cross-sections. We can manipulate the shadow of a tesseract, watching its 3D projection twist and morph in ways that seem physically impossible, yet are mathematically sound. These digital tools are our prosthetic senses, our periscopes into a higher geometric plane. We are like Plato's prisoners in the cave, but instead of firelight, we have processing power casting the shadows on our wall. Still, a profound question remains. What is it like for the being casting the shadow? Stepping beyond mere visualization, we confront a mind-bending question. What would life be like in a universe with 4 spatial dimensions? The implications for biology, physics, and perception are staggering, bordering on the divine. A being native to such a reality would perceive our 3D world with a godlike transparency. For them, a solid object like a locked safe is not a barrier, but an open book. They could simply step around its 3D walls through the fourth dimension to retrieve the contents within, just as we can lift a pencil out of a circle drawn on paper. Our very bodies would be completely exposed to their gaze. A 4D physician could observe all of our internal organs at once, the heart beating, the lungs inflating, the brain firing, as a single unified system. They could perform impossibly delicate surgery, removing a cancerous tumor without ever breaking the skin, by accessing our interior directly from a higher dimension. Even their own anatomy would have to be profoundly different. A simple, linear digestive tract like ours would effectively slice a 4D creature into two separate pieces. Their biology would necessitate a more complex, non-orientable structure, perhaps akin to a Klein bottle, a surface with no distinct inside or outside. They could see every room in a house simultaneously, untie a knot without touching its ends, and perceive the entire timeline of a 3D event unfurled. To such a creature, we would be as simple and predictable as characters on a page, our inner workings and hidden places completely, utterly transparent. If such beings exist, they would be the silent, unseen masters of our reality. This journey into the fourth dimension may seem like a fanciful game for philosophers and mathematicians, but modern physics has brought it crashing into the realm of testable science. The search for a grand unified theory, a single elegant equation to describe all the forces of nature, has led physicists to a startling and profound conclusion. Our universe may be hiding its true complexity. The most promising candidate for this theory of everything is string theory, and its more recent evolution, M-theory. These frameworks replace the idea of fundamental particles with the concept of unimaginably small, vibrating one-dimensional strings. For the complex mathematics of these theories to hold together and describe our reality, they require the existence of extra spatial dimensions. Not just one, but perhaps 6 or 7, bringing the grand total to 10 or 11 dimensions. So where are they? Why can we not see them? The prevailing theory is known as compactification. It suggests these additional dimensions are curled up or compactified into a tiny, intricate shape on a scale far smaller than an atom, the Planck length. Imagine a tightrope walker. From a distance, their world is a one-dimensional line. But for a tiny ant on the rope, there is a whole other dimension, the circumference they can crawl around. We may be like the distant observer, too large and coarse to perceive the tiny, curled-up geometry of space-time itself. Scientists at the Large Hadron Collider are actively hunting for indirect evidence, looking for energy signatures that might indicate gravity leaking away into these hidden dimensions. The fourth dimension is no longer just a concept. It's a physical possibility. We stand at the precipice of understanding, having explored the mind's eye, the physicist's equations, and the shadows on our digital cave walls. The final frontier of this inquiry, however, is not external, but internal. It forces us to confront the very nature of our own perception. Are the 3 dimensions we experience the absolute, unwavering truth of the universe, or are they merely the limits of our evolved biology? Our senses are not pristine windows onto objective reality. They are survival tools, exquisitely honed for a specific purpose on a specific world. We perceive the sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum that helped our ancestors find ripe fruit, and the range of sounds that alerted them to predators. We are blind to the ultraviolet world of a bee and deaf to the infrasonic calls of an elephant. Our perception is a bespoke user interface, designed for survival, not for grasping the ultimate framework of existence. So, could humanity evolve further? Could we, through natural processes or deliberate technological augmentation, develop the neural capacity to process a fourth spatial dimension? The brain's incredible neuroplasticity suggests it may not be impossible. The quest to comprehend the fourth dimension is therefore more than a mathematical puzzle. It is a profound meditation on our own limitations and our potential to transcend them. It is the next great evolutionary leap, a shift from exploring the world out there to reconfiguring the senses that build our world in here. The fourth dimension remains a tantalizing whisper from a larger reality, a challenge to the finality of our senses. The ultimate question is not whether it exists, but whether we will ever become beings capable of seeing it.